Let's try to understand Eurocentrism again because it's linked to the age of discovery. So, scholars basically talked about the European colonialism and its present day structure or the successor Western imperialism and together termed the two as Eurocentrism. This term originated because European colonialism, in its expanse and its reach, was much wider than any other form of colonialism suffered by any other country for that matter. Which brings us to the age of discovery or exploration, which began with Christopher Columbus' voyage of 1492 to discover the New World or the non Christian colonies. This age of discovery, followed by the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, and the usage of the in all of them, according to the author, shows the predominance of the importance of the European worldview according to the European people and how they projected this to be the most important events even for the rest of the world. And this was followed after the age of discovery in the 15th to 19th century, which is also called as the modern history, and the usage of the words modern or rational, which began gaining limelight in the period of 15th to 19th century. Thus, it tells us of this fact that these words like modern and rational, all of them had European origins or origins from the European colonialism period, and that is where it gains particular importance. Now, when we talk about the Columbus voyage, because it was such a central event in terms of the European colonialism, various schools of thought have talked about it and have dealt with it in different ways. According to the modern school of thought, Columbus voyage was and should be seen as a glorious event because it marked the beginning of the colonizers' misadventures, and according to them the adventures in the uncivilized societies which were non-Christian in nature. And it basically, because of this voyage, liberation of them occurred. Now the postmodern thought are critical of the modern school, and they see that it's purely Europe's claims over modernity. However, the postmodern thought limitations comes from the fact that they only target the modern school on the cultural front, which is to say that concrete political fronts and other such things are not talked about in detail in the postmodern thought. The post-colonial school differs, however, because even though it overlaps with the postmodern thought to a large extent, it also tries to reject the universalizing claims of Eurocentrism, which is to say that it tries to tackle the ideas of the European view in the political sphere. However, the methodology used to tackle the Eurocentric view is purely political in nature, which is to say that even though the focus or the context of the content of the discussion changes according to the author, but the terms of engagement or the framework of the discussion, because it has been, let's say, taken from the European universalization, it remains the same, which is to say that technically we are talking about different things, but we have lost our Indic civilization value attached to that core, which brings us to the decolonial school, which is similar to the post-colonial school in a lot of ways, but it tries to tackle the limitations of the post-colonial school, which is to say that even though both of them agree that the European universalism, the European voyage of Christopher Columbus caused a lot of problems for the individuals like racism, genocide, etc. The decolonial school particularly differs because it tries to tackle the universalizing ideas of the European view itself, which is to say that ideas like modern, rational, and other such ideas which are Eurocentric in nature, which have been forced to become universal views and are accepted by the post-colonial thought, are also challenged continuously by the decolonial school, which is to say the decolonial school rejects this universalizing claim of the European view in a much more balanced and nuanced fashion. And it particularly states that the European view is not the sole narrative from which we judge the world by and large. There are a lot many views, there are a lot many local views, there are a lot many Indic views and other such views, and it's a subjectivity, and there are subjectivities attached to how you decide to view the world. And European view is just one of the many options to view the world affairs. So decoloniality is a state of mind that allows you independence and freedom from the shackles of the universalizing European claims, which brings us to the fact of how Europe uses dark ages and the age of discovery and renaissance, so and forth after that, to describe the age of enlightenment and how it brought light into this world. However, these dark ages, which was the period before the age of discovery in Europe, which lasted for around a millennium, this these dark ages, when they were going around in Europe, the other countries of the world, the American countries or Bharat for that matter, all of these countries did not have dark ages. They were prosperous civilizations which were flourishing in their own different ways. And when these civilizations, now colonialized and having lost touch with their Indic roots, when these civilizations celebrate the age of discovery, the age of enlightenment, it shows how much the colonial mindset has shackled them. It shows how they are still not free from the coloniality, that mindset, and it's still present in their ideas. They have completely lost the touch of their Indic roots, which brings us to the decolonial scholarship and why it is necessary to bring into the limelight the actual Indic roots of these civilizations that existed before the colonialism happened and the value that it has. That, which brings us to the fact that these decolonial scholarships, most of them originate from Latin American countries or the African countries, and one would think that these experiences and the scholarship would come more from the Asian countries. The reason being that a lot of Asian countries still retain their religious identity. However, a lot of Asian countries are still stuck not on the decolonial approach but on the post-colonial thought. The author herein gives us two examples, one of Bharat and one of Palestine. He says that a lot of Asian and Middle Eastern countries are still stuck with the post-colonial thought as opposed to the decolonial thought, and hence these scholarships are lacking. Then the author talks about the Asian experience, which is to say that the Asian experience is currently an imitation of the African and Latin American decolonial scholarship to a large extent. It has to be different and it has to flourish differently because of two reasons. One, the experiences suffered by Asian countries and individuals was different. They had multiple colonizing experience and a lot of them were able to retain their religious identity. But also on a secondary level, if the Asian experiences subvert into the idea of Latin American and African experience, then it defeats the whole purpose of decoloniality, because decoloniality has to be subjective according to the needs of a particular country, region, or their specific experiences. Which brings us to the fact that a lot of these literature have a racial lens attached to them. That is to say, the difference between the natives and the European people on black and white basis, or people of color and the white basis. Now this racial lens is there according to the author because a large amount of the African and the American countries have lost their religious identity because of the colonization experiences. Which is to say that a lot of American countries, predominantly, which were Indic in nature, are now Christian in nature, in their religion, and African countries are either Christian or Islamic, which is the one of the primary reasons why in the American and Latin American decolonial literature, the racial lens gets the predominant narrative and the religious lens is often ignored. Because even if these decolonial literature or these scholars try to get back the religious identity, it is already too far lost, and it's very difficult to escape the clutches of the universalizing reach of the church or of Christianity. Which brings us to the fact that the religious lens is missing in a lot of these scholarships. But according to the author, certain correction in the literature that has been up and coming has happened, and it has tried to cover the religious lens attached to Christianity also, and trying to deal with it in detail. But the Asian perspective on this particular thing is still lacking. Now this Asian perspective is also important because the local resistance offered by these Asian countries, especially Bharat, to retain their religious identity was extremely important, and that is the reason why Bharat and a lot of Asian countries were able to retain their religious identity and did not lose them. This local resistance has to be examined, and a specific experience of decolonial literature focusing on these aspects with a religious lens has to come about, because this also shows that the European colonialism and Western imperialism present day is still in a constant tussle with the local resistance offered by Bharat, because they were not able to convert Bharat to their religion despite so many money being spent on, let's say, the missionary movements and other such things. However, the author then concludes by telling us that the learning experience of these Asian societies should also happen from the American and the African experiences with coloniality, because the European colonization and the way it functions, its modus operandi was more or less same in all of these countries. Hence, the Asian experience can also learn from the literature of the American and the African countries or the Latin American countries.